Good day to everybody. I will continue with the lecture that Mr. Bella started, focusing on the stone fragments that have been found during the research. Just to repeat, during the research, two medieval phases have been found. The first one being the chapel, like an equestrian hall with four pairs of pillars carrying three rib vaults. And the second phase is the fortified church, which ended with the round tower. Considering the significance of the Hospitallers fort and the aesthetic quality of the whole chapel, a very small number of stone fragments have been found. And also they differ much in style. So they have helped us in defining the date of construction for both of the medieval phases of the church. These stone fragments could be dated to two periods. The first is the period of the first chapel, the 13th century, and the second is the period of the fortified church, which is dated by the stone fragments to the year of around 1500. The first church, stone fragments that can be defined are columns with bases, a staircase, and the rib vaults. So as has been said before, four pairs of columns with bases have been preserved, but columns in a very small amount, and mainly the bases, which consists of two profiled torruses, one trochilus, a plinth, and a stilabat. A special element that connects the lower torus with the plinth is a griff. And the griff here in Pakrac is defined by the ending in the shape of volutas. The griff as such has continued through the whole medieval period, and therefore it succumbed to stylistic influences and also changes, from the Byzantine influence to Romanesque griffs in Benedictine abbeys in Zelen, St. Jakob, and Neustadt. One of the first griffs that have a voluta-like shape are found in France, like this Parisian church, Saint-Julien-le-Pauvre, from the 12th century. In Hungary, griffs are very common in medieval period, from the Royal Chapel in Esztergom from the 12th century, Cathedral in Gyulafehérvár, etc. These first griffs in Hungary are not shaped in the shape of volutas, but as double shells or bear claws or similar. Pakrac-like griff are found in the Cistercian Abbey in Pilis, and also in the Cistercian Abbey in Topusko, Croatia. So it can be said that this kind of griffs are connected to the monastic orders that have come from France and that draw direct influences from French Gothic. So as I have said before, here are some examples of the French griffs with the voluta-like shape, and the German griffs from the 12th century. Similar griffs can be found in Dubrovnik also, which is quite significant. This glyph is from the portal of the Dominican church in the old town of Dubrovnik. And what is really significant is that the glyph in this form in Old Town Dubrovnik continued till the 16th century, as can be seen in this glyph in the Palace Divona or Sponza in Dubrovnik. The second composition of stone fragments that can be connected to the first phase of the church is the staircase, which is located on the southwest side of the church. It consists of single stone slabs, all connected to a single axe, and also the bases are just as profiled, very similar to the bases of the columns. We cannot tell for sure, but concerning the very similar Hospitallers also church from the 13th century in Sopron, it is very possible that the Pakrac staircase also led to the western tribune. And here are two vault ribs that have been found during the research. They are characteristic by the almond-shaped rib, a square profile, and a gutter. This type of rib is characteristic for the monastic architecture of Croatia of the beginning of 13th century. And here are some examples. This is the Franciscan church in Ašice. This is the Dominican church in Čazma, a Cistercian church in Topusko, and here is the rib of an almond shape in first the Templar and then a Hospitallers church in Gora. And all of these examples date to the beginning of the 13th century. And as Jura said, the pieces that have been identified as sacrarium that are also connected to the first church. To the second phase, to the second medieval phase of the church, some other fragments can be connected, and they have been identified as the pieces of the window, pieces of one piece of portal, and also pieces of a western portal that Mr. Belay has already mentioned. So these two stone fragments, the first two, are very similar in the stringing of a semicircular profiling, which is characteristic of the late medieval period. They have been identified as the pieces of the windows. This is a window crossing that is actually a proof that the windows were made in a complex form. It is presumably that they were before us. This is just an example of how the window crossing is connected. This is the only piece of this kind of profiling that has been found during the research. It is characterized by the stringing of an S profile, which is also characteristic of the late medieval period. And here are some examples from the late 15th century of a portal being composed of the S profiles here in Croatia. And the latest and the most significant stone, stone fragment that has helped in the dating of the fortified church are the fragments of the western portal. Unfortunately, just the bases have been preserved, and just 3 stones. 2 have been preserved on the north side, and 1 here the south side. The profiling can be described from the doors to the outer surface of the wall, here in the following. Two gutters with centrally placed semi-torus profiles, a pear-shaped or a wedge-shaped profile with cannelars, and a semi-column here at the far west that is not seen very well. Stylistic elements that can be identified on this portal are the following. A portal has no distinctive base, but the base is a roughly shaped stone slab. A profiling of the portal has no base just as well, but the profiling just ascends from the general base. Gutters, this is here, are additionally profiled with a centrally placed semicircular profile, and also at for the last stylistic element, this here, a pear-shaped or an edge-shaped profile, has the form of some of the vault ribs that have been identified as the acceptance of the Czech Gothic style just around the year 1500. I'm sorry, here. Based on this stylistic characteristic, several portals have been found that share the same characteristic. The first one is the portal, the western portal of the Church of the Pauline monks in Moslavačka Gora in Croatia, so-called Bela Crkva. This is the portal of the Pekerc Óvár portal, and this is also the western portal of the Franciscan church in Vocin, which is dated in the beginning of the 16th century. All of these portals show significant receiving of the style of the Czech Gothic that is connected to the reign of Vladislav II. Here is a detail of the Vocin portal, where we can see the elements of cannellared shape, and this is just for comparison, these are the ribs from the churches in Ilok, where Czech Gothic has been confirmed. So, for a conclusion, it can be stated that the chapel, Hospitallers chapel in Pakrac, had two significant medieval phases, and in both of those phases, church was lavishly decorated in a style that was contemporary at that time. One of the similar and comparative examples of first phase of the church is definitely Templars and later Hospitallers church in Gora. The similarities are seen in the shape of a floor plan. It's an equestrian hall just as well. In the shape of the columns with profiled bases, in the shape of the ribs and type of the ribs, in the shape of the vault just as well. It has been stated by several authors that in Gora, direct French influences have been accepted, and that French Gothic is seen in these churches. And the same can be said for the first phase of the church in Pakrac. As for the second phase, it is not yet possible to determine the shape of the fortified church. It is presumed that the fortified church was ended by the rounded tower. And it was also very lavishly decorated, as can be seen by the western portal. So for both of these medieval churches, we can only be sorry that so little has been preserved. Thank you for your attention. Thank you. Goodbye.